Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Tackling Your Taxes, Requesting Penalty Abatement. My name is Aisha Servati, and I'm the director of Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid's Low Income Taxpayer Clinic, where we advise and represent taxpayers about federal tax dispute issues. On this episode, we'll be talking about penalty abatement with the IRS. So, when does the IRS assess penalties? What is penalty abatement? How do I qualify for penalty abatement? How to request penalty abatement? And then some helpful resources. So, the IRS imposes penalties when you don't meet your tax filing obligations. So, some examples of those are failure to file when you don't file your tax return by the due date. You can file for an extension to file your tax return in order to avoid a failure to file penalty, for example. Failure to pay, which is when you don't pay the taxes owed by the due date, so generally April 15th of each tax year. If you do, for example, file for an extension to file, you still will be assessed that failure to pay penalty. Accuracy-related penalties apply when you don't claim all of your income or when you claim deductions or credits that you don't qualify for. Erroneous claim for refund or credit penalty. So when you submit a claim for refund of credit of income tax for an excessive amount and reasonable cause does not apply. And we'll talk more about reasonable cause. Dishonored checks or payments. And then underpayment of estimated taxes. So for certain individuals, such as those who are self-employed, have a requirement to make estimated taxes. And if you don't pay enough in estimated taxes or don't pay on time, then you can be assessed a penalty. So the IRS also charges interest and penalties and balances due every month until paid in full. Interest is statutorily required and cannot be removed, and that's the amount of interest on the balance. If there is interest on the penalty and you do get that penalty abated, then that interest will automatically be removed, but you'll still have that interest on the amount of balance due. There's no way to get rid of that. So you will receive a written letter or notice from the IRS in the mail outlining any penalties imposed and interest due along with that total amount due. And if you disagree with the amount owed on that penalty, you can dispute the penalty itself. So this is different than getting that penalty removed. So this is if you disagree with the assessment of the penalty. So you can call the IRS at the telephone number listed on your notice or write a letter to the IRS to the address on the notice explaining why you disagree with the penalty, and then make sure you have any supporting documentation that clarifies your position and why you disagree with the IRS assessing that penalty. So for penalty abatement, you may be able to reduce or remove certain penalties, and that's called penalty abatement. There are two main types of penalty abatement that I'll talk about, which is first-time penalty abatement and reasonable cause. There is also special pandemic-related penalty relief for certain 2020 and 2021 tax debts. I'm not going to go into that in depth in this presentation, but if you do have questions, you can call the IRS and ask them if you have a 2020 or 2021 debt, whether that relief is available, or you can contact an LITC to gain more information about what types of penalty relief is included in that. And that is generally automatic. So if you did have a qualifying 2020 or 2021 tax debt, you should have received a letter about getting that related penalty relief, but it did not happen automatically for everyone. So you can contact the IRS for more information. So first-time penalty abatement is available for certain failure to file, which again is not filing by the due date, and failure to pay, which is not paying the amount due by the due date penalties. It's applicable to a single tax year. And to qualify, you must be in good tax filing compliance, meaning you've filed all your required tax returns, you don't have any other penalties outstanding, and that you've made arrangements on any tax debts that are currently outstanding for the previous 3 years. So, for example, if you have a tax debt for 2022 that you're trying to qualify for first-time penalty abatement, you could request it for 2022 as long as 2019, 2020, and 2021 don't have any of those issues that I've mentioned. Then there's reasonable cause penalty abatement, which is available for certain penalties like that failure to pay, failure to file, and then also accuracy related penalties. So those penalties for making so not including, perhaps all of your income, or for claiming a credit that you weren't eligible for. So you can assert reasonable cause for more than one tax year if it's applicable. And to qualify for failure to file or failure to pay penalties, you must have exercised what is called ordinary care and prudence in following the tax law, but were nevertheless unable to file your return or pay your taxes on time. So that might be because of a natural disaster or fire, inability to get certain records, or death of a taxpayer or immediate family member. Generally, it does not include reliance on a tax professional, lack of knowledge, mistakes, or lack of funds. So you want to make sure that the reason that you were unable to file or pay on time falls within those certain examples that I listed. And then also making sure that if, for example, it's tax year 2022 that you're seeking reasonable cause for, that you made steps to become in payment compliance or filing compliance. So by doing those things immediately as soon as you could. So as soon as that natural disaster was over, then you made steps in order to do so. Or once you're able to get a hold of those records, you were able to file your tax return, and that you didn't have any unreasonable delay afterwards. So to qualify for reasonable cause penalty abatement of an accuracy related penalty, you must show that you acted with a reasonable cause and good faith. And it's all based on, for reasonable cause, it's your facts and circumstances. And so they look at factors such as efforts you made to report the correct tax, the complexity of the tax issue, your education, experience, or knowledge of tax law, steps you took to understand your tax obligation, or if you sought help from a tax professional. And then also, if you did seek help from a tax professional, when did you seek help from them? Were they qualified to give you advice? Did you, rely on that advice? And to what extent did you rely on it? And then that kind of goes back to your education experience and own knowledge of tax law. So if you want to request penalty abatement, there is an IRS form to do so. It's IRS form 843, and you can use that to request first-time abatement or reasonable cause penalty abatement. You can also call the IRS at the telephone number on your IRS notice or letter, or write to the IRS at the address provided on your notice. For first-time penalty abatement, it's often encouraged to call the IRS at the number listed on your notice and let them know that you're requesting first-time penalty abatement. And then they will look and see if you meet those requirements for the previous 3 years. And then if your type of penalty is the type of penalty allowed to get first-time penalty abatement, and if that is the case, then it will be granted. For reasonable cause, you want to be prepared to provide documentation explaining your specific situation and why you meet the requirements of reasonable cause for that certain type of penalty. The IRS does first consider first-time penalty abatement, if applicable. So in your situation, if you haven't had penalty abatement before, or in that previous 3-year period, then the IRS will often consider first-time penalty abatement first and then look at reasonable cause afterwards. Or, for example, if it was for a penalty that isn't eligible for first-time penalty abate, then they will look at reasonable cause. If your request for penalty abatement is denied, you have 30 days to request a review hearing with the IRS Independent Office of Appeals. And that'll be 30 days from the date of the letter that you receive. So it's not 30 days from when you received that letter. So you want to make sure you pay attention to the date on the letter and then follow the steps in your letter on how to request that review hearing. And the IRS Independent Office of Appeals is just that. It's a division of the IRS that is separate from the other divisions, and it is used to review actions by the IRS to make sure that the process is fair and equitable. So now I'm just going to mention some helpful resources. United Way 211 can be helpful to get access to legal services 24/7. And they do have information about taxes, so you can contact them or you can connect with the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic through the United Way 211. Then I do list some IRS websites and the Taxpayer Advocate Service website that have links to helpful information. And the Taxpayer Advocate Service just released the information on their website. So that is very up-to-date information on that. If you want to learn more in general about taxes, you can check out MMLA's Facebook page or YouTube channel for past Tackling Your Taxes series episodes. And if you do have a federal tax issue that you need help with, we encourage you to call MMLA's intake at 612-334-5970, and we'll see if we're able to help you. So thank you for watching this episode of Tackling Your Taxes, and I'll see you soon with our next topics, which will be on contacting the Taxpayer Advocate Service for assistance on the IRS level things, and then also looking at the Minnesota Department of Revenue's Taxpayer Rights Advocates Office and resources that they have available to help taxpayers. Thank you and have a great day.